Society Matters.
Hi, I'm your host, Liam Carballal. This is History Repeats on hmTv. Once more, as your host, I would like to introduce my friend Rich. How you doing, Rich?
How you doing, Liam? Good to see you today.
How have you been, Rich? How was your Halloween?
It was all right. You know, we had a couple of kids at the house, and it doesn't seem like there's as many kids outside anymore, you know?
I think I already asked you that last time.
Yeah. Oh, it's all right, though. So.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been a lot for me. My brother is actually, he just got a liver transplant, so we've been dealing with a lot here too.
Pretty serious, right? So.
Yeah. So Rich, I want to continue what we've been doing the last few episodes to talk about movies, TV shows, and their historical accuracy. I yesterday just finished Death by Lightning, which is about the assassination and the early presidency of President Garfield. Well, he died 3 months in office, so his entire presidency was the early part of it. I don't think you got a chance to see it.
Nah,
right?
not yet, but that Michael Shannon, very good actor. You know, sometimes those actors that do those roles where there's not much known about him it's tough to make it look interesting and so on. Like you see that Nuremberg is out right now with Russell Crowe.
Did you see it?
I didn't see it yet. I saw parts of it on like YouTube and interviews and stuff like that. So I mean, as heinous of a man as Goering is or was, right? And where we're sitting here at the Holocaust Museum, there's been a lot more written on him and a lot more, documentaries and even Valkyrie, where he had a small part, in Valkyrie itself. So when you look at Netflix, I think Netflix is really kind of, they're doing a really good job with the history itself.
Yeah.
You know, and they're getting it down. They must have their own departments that are now handling that. Yeah. Because these streaming companies are still relatively new. HBO used to be known for doing a lot of history and, you know, the military history
conspiracy
channel.
About the
Holocaust and everything, right? Yeah. With Heydrich and Eichmann and all the government henchmen that ran the different departments. But you're seeing that those cable, not even the cables, the streaming companies are really doing some like unbelievable work. Yeah, and they're doing it pretty quickly. And what does that tell you? That people like their history. They like it for new things to be showed every year. Yeah. And they're actually doing that, which is a big deal. Yeah. Like Netflix. What is their stock price? Their stock price is something crazy, to the point I couldn't buy any of it, you know. And
it's weird to think they started as a mailing service.
Yeah, well, that goes to show you like the changes in technology and how people are watching things these days. And heck, we could watch it on our own TVs or computers, but the history they're investing in these things now, which is important. You know?
Well, now we got a bunch of new stuff on our lists. Yeah. I really like Death by Lightning. There's a lot of little details in there that I only just learned about. So yeah, thumbs up for Death by Lightning. Nuremberg also looks really good. I hear good things about Russell Crowe.
You have I think Michael Shannon is Jackson. Justice Jackson, who runs the American legal team to go up against the Nazis.
Really?
Yeah.
In Nuremberg?
He's in that.
Oh, so he's got a good had a good year.
He's been in a lot of movies. And then who is it that was in Freddie Mercury? Was that?
Rami Malek.
Yeah, he's in that, and he was in the Pacific, which I think we'll be talking about today.
Yeah.
So I saw a great clip of him talking to, Goering, and said, how could you follow Hitler? He was never really promoted. He was never really successful in any one thing. He was seen as a loser within society.
Hitler?
And Hitler was there. He was Austrian. He deserted the Austrian draft to go into the German draft, and by accident, he was able to get into the army. Yeah. And by German army regulations, he probably should never have been taken in because he was malnourished. And then in the film clip, it said because he made us feel German. Yeah. In terms of speaking and stuff like that. But even though he was Austrian, and his German had a Austrian accent to it, which is pretty interesting. So I think Russell Crowe is probably they're gonna do pretty well with that. John Slattery from Mad Men, and he was in Charlie Wilson's War, and probably he was in also another great war was Flags of Our Fathers. He was in that as the main government official who was responsible for the bond money. Yeah. So we're printing money. We're going to go bust. We have to sell these bonds. Yeah. He was really good in that. And it's there's some really good stuff that's out there. And being a teacher and a professor and someone likes to write, you're starting to get a lot more sources, resources out there to show your students and to be able to break it down and go over, and like what we're talking about right now, the history versus Hollywood, because in every film they don't get it 100% correct. Yep. Sometimes there's so much in detail, or they look at it a little bit differently, or sometimes they just make mistakes. And I'm sure with the Nuremberg film, what you're going to look at is there'll probably be some historians that kind of come out and say, they got this correct, or they went in a little bit of a different direction, and so on. The last one to look at Nuremberg was Alec Baldwin from Massapequa, right? Just south of where we are, southeast. And he made that for, I guess it was TBS or TNT about 30 years ago. And it was actually pretty interesting. And they couldn't believe with Haas, who was the commandant of Auschwitz, that he was so blatantly out in the open, blunt, in terms of talking about the killings. And, right to the point there, where they weren't hiding from it, or he wasn't hiding from it. So,
when I think of that, I don't know if it's a false equivalency, but like I think about Curtis LeMay. He coined the phrase "bomb them into the Stone Age." Yeah. He firebombed Tokyo. He
said that if we lost the war, that he would have been tried and convicted as a war criminal.
Yeah.
But that's the thing with the war, and I mean, heck, you look at it, Grant, right? And then Sherman coins the phrase like "war is hell." That's the only way that the war is going to come to an end. Yeah. Civil war, which makes it worse, is it's against our own people and our own property and territory and everything else. But that's the only way the Confederates were coming back into the Union. There had to be killings in terms of the battlefield. Yeah. And the civilians had to feel it. Or otherwise, it would have taken a lot longer. And then with the Japanese, you look at, they're fighting that Kota Bushido, and, if the bomb wasn't dropped, it would have been more people that were killed, and somewhere in the range of 200,000 Americans that they know of that would have been killed, and the war wouldn't have come to an end until probably 1947. And then Truman said is, how do I look at the mothers of, these armed forces, veterans that have died, and tell them that I had this weapon that I could have ended the war, and I didn't. So there's a lot to that, even to the point where Eisenhower was against the use of the atomic bomb. The bomb was supposed to be used against the Germans, but they really don't have that Trinity test until Potsdam Conference in July of 1945, and he kind of spoke out against the bomb, against some of the Japanese.
Eisenhower did?
Yeah, against some of American generals and admirals. And they said, Ike, you did a good job against Hitler, but this was a totally different war over here. You know, and I think that's what we're going to talk about, right? Is Band of Brothers, the Pacific, and the Air War. And you see the differences, and they do an outstanding job in portraying those differences. To compare and contrast Band of Brothers and the Pacific, you got to remember Band of Brothers is about Easy Company, right? So you're talking about the entire group, right? You're talking about the airborne. You're talking about not only Dick Winters, but all the way down to the private there, right? You're talking about, was it Colin Hanks, who's in Nuremberg, who he portrays a second lieutenant that just graduates from West Point, and he's got no experience.
He's green.
He's green, and the guys know he's green, and you know they have beards like you do, you know, because you know they're fighting in the Hergon Forest, and you know they're just getting to a point where some of that discipline is coming off of them because they're tired and they don't think they're going to survive the war. And you know, they call it the broken edge of a bottle, you know, that they're at, you know. And
I was about to say, like, the Pacific, I thought, and Band of Brothers, as you mentioned, they both do a real good job of battle fatigue and PTSD.
Everything. The Pacific is more of the individual, right? You're looking at Barcelona, Sledge, and then Lecky. And they're all the same, but they're all different. You know, and then I think it was at one point that Lecky and Sledge almost came into contact with each other.
Yeah, I think
they kind of pass each other's paths, whereas Band of Brothers, there's always a connection. Even when Lieutenant Buck Compton comes back, he comes and he sees the men. He was like an outstanding athlete. If you remember, he got a disciplinary rebuttal. It wasn't like an Article 15 or anything like that you'd see in the military, right? But he was taking money from the enlisted men, playing cards, and you know, trading cigarettes. And you know, Winters had said to him, "You don't put yourself in position to take from these men. You're already given enough." And he goes, "Well, this is my way of knowing these men. You were in Georgia at Toccoa with them. You were, you know, running up Curry. You were doing all these different things. I just got here." So the way he was able to do it, and as the you know, the documentary showed, was he's playing darts, but he's throwing with the opposite hand. Right? And you know, Garnier says to him, was it Garnier? Who was it? It was Garnier, or was who's the one who did all the impersonations?
Oh, God, I can't remember.
His name
that was one of my favorite scenes too.
With Sobel.
Yeah.
So and the name will come to me, but he goes, you know, "Lieutenant, you can be using your left hand all night." And then, you know, he does it with his right, and then it's a bullseye. You know, and then, like, he's taking cigarettes, and he's drinking with the guys, and, you know, he's playing some cards. And he was very close to those guys. And the interesting thing with Sobel is that Sobel was a bastard, but he trained those guys early on, so he made those guys pretty tough. But they wanted to shoot him in the field, though. There's a lot of truth to that. And then later on in life, they invited Sobel to the reunions, even though they didn't like him. Right? They still, you know, Garnier invites him, and Sobel tried to commit suicide later on in life.
Really?
And somehow it didn't, he wasn't, you know, it's tough to say it was suicide, right? But he wasn't successful in doing it. He couldn't carry it fully out. And then he lived in a veterans home and so on. And then his first sergeant was Evans, I believe it was. And they made him look like kind of a, you know, I don't know, like lackey, right? But in the books, they'll say that he was actually a pretty good guy. He just happened to be in a very tough spot that he had to serve under him. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? And so Band of Brothers in the Pacific, what you're looking at is Band of Brothers is going to talk about the unit, right? Mm-hmm. It's going to talk about the whole group. The Pacific is going to talk about those three stories and how other stories are connected to them itself there, right? And, you know, Easy Company up until the very last moment, those guys were still kind of together. Some of them were expected to go over to the Pacific and fight and train and everything. And then the war comes to an end, and then the war in the Pacific comes to an end. Mm-hmm. But in the Pacific, you're looking at Lecky gets wounded, right? So he ends up, I believe it was in Queens, in a VA, right? Mm-hmm. Basilone goes back with the men. He gets married. Very famous Marine from New Jersey, northern New Jersey. He was in the Army. He was in the Philippines. He was a wild guy. John Basilone. Very, very, very tough character. He was probably from a town that's very similar to Seacliff or Glen Cove up here, right? You have an Italian area that was up here. Parents speak Italian and stuff like that. So, and then Sledge was a little bit different because he was from, I believe it was from Alabama. Yep. And, you know, looked like a little Southern aristocracy a little bit. Mm-hmm. His father was very well educated. He was a doctor. And his dad would tell the mother, mm-hmm. you don't know what he's been through. Yeah. Meanwhile, his father, I believe, was a doctor during World War I, mm-hmm. where he could have been. I'm not quite sure. The father was there, and he was a doctor later on. But he knew because he was overseas, and he was in France during the fighting. And he kept reminding the mother, you have to leave him alone. Yeah. He will get through this at some point. I did a podcast a couple of weeks back, Andrew Michella, and his wife had said how proud she was of him at about 78 years old in terms of his PTSD. Yeah. So 78 years, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what, 60, 55 years after they were in uniform. And you see that where he goes, I'm never putting on a uniform again. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of truth to that because a lot of the veterans wanted nothing to do with the government. Mm-hmm. So they get the GI Bill, right? A lot of them don't even fill out the paperwork. Some of them pay their own way without getting that benefit because they don't want anything to do with the government. Yeah. And then there's that clip where he goes to, was it Alabama Polytechnic, I think it was. Mm-hmm. And the young girl, you know, pretty girl, she's sitting there. They're roughly the same age, right? And she's asking him all these different questions. And he goes, well, I guess I can't do this, and I didn't do that. And then she goes, well, what did the Marines teach you to do?
Kill people.
They taught me how to kill, and I got pretty good at it. And he was a soft-spoken guy. He was a quiet guy. He wasn't looking for any fanfare, and so on. So, you know, these films do a good job in showing that human side. And right, and at the end, you see it with the credits. They like they get somebody that looks like you. There's a resemblance there. Yeah. You know, when you look at Winters, he had blonde hair. Mm-hmm. And the actor that portrayed him, it was a Damian Lewis, was a redhead and he was British and so on. But he played a strong figure, a bright guy, a guy that, you know, knew leadership, you know, and he did a good job in doing it. So sometimes it doesn't have to be completely exact, but it's, you know, it's a good thing. And these films, these series, are used on the college level, and they are used on the high school level.
I remember when I tried to join the military, they would play these just in the waiting room while you're taking the tests. So
yeah, those were big things. I mean, I grew up in the 1980s in Top Gun. That was unbelievable for the recruitment process. Unbelievable, So there are certain films that will kind of push people into that interest itself there, which is interesting. And then what was the third one that we had there?
Masters of the Air.
Yeah,
that was Apple TV.
The Apple TV, but it might have been DreamWorks, right? I think it was maybe DreamWorks, right?
I think it was. I think it was another one, an extension.
Yeah. So it was. I think it was that collaboration. And you got to remember, Tom Hanks made some of the worst movies that you could ever make.
Right.
But the staying power is that they're involved for so long.
Yeah.
That they learn from the bad ones. What does he make? He makes Joe versus the Volcano. The Bonfire of the Vanities almost destroyed him. A League of Their Own saved his career. He ends up making Punchline. He ends up making The Money Pit.
Yeah.
Bachelor Party, which was very funny, but he's not winning any Academy Awards with that, right? So these guys, they make these films and their staying power, they learn from these things.
Yeah.
And then I think with him really was probably Forrest Gump and Saving Private Ryan, where he was, a very bright guy, and very well spoken, and he has that relationship with Steven Spielberg from Saving Private Ryan, and he's going to do things that are going to stand the test of time in a very positive way, and it's speaking about some very, very difficult subjects. Like we're here at the Holocaust Museum, right?
Yep.
Well, they do the liberation of the concentration camps in Band of Brothers and then the Masters of the Sky, right? Rosie, who here he is, he's a Jewish-American pilot.
Yep.
He gets shot down over the eastern side of the lines. The Soviets take him. He's wounded. Yep. And he ends up getting taken further into the rear, into Poland, because, believe it or not, at the end of the war, you didn't want the Soviets taking you.
Really?
American prisoners were actually, they were said, like, you're better off sometimes in German hands than being in Soviet hands. Look, the irony of that, right? That's our ally, right? Because they thought that Stalin was going to use the prisoners of war as poker chips. And they sent them all the way in a roundabout way, right? B-29 bombers that landed in Soviet territory, especially in the Pacific, they might have taken the crew and sent them a couple miles in a complete opposite direction of their planes, because they stripped those planes down to figure out how those planes were built.
I think there was that documentary, Stealing the B-29.
Yeah, stealing. He gave his spies a couple of years to do that, right? So there's that clip in the third one here, where you have this Jewish officer, Jewish-American officer. Now, I don't know on his dog tags if it said Protestant or Lutheran or Catholic, because some Jewish airmen went up and they had different dog tags to cover themselves in a certain way, right? In a certain, and I'm not sure if he quite did that, but he was with the Soviets and he was going to get a aircraft that actually had to take him to Moscow, and then Moscow back to England. And he went into a camp that was liberated. Yep. And the Soviet officer who could speak English was saying, we're finding all of these camps, and they're realizing the killings that occur. And then when he goes back and he meets with other officers, he says the Germans deserve what they're getting right now. And you remember that's at the end of the war. And the irony of it was American soldiers who went into German territory, they saw more in common with the Germans. So and I say it's the craziest thing. In some ways it's not, right? You had, which two immigrant groups are the largest at this time? Germans and Irish, right? The Germans were middle class. They had heat in their homes, they had toilet paper, they had good food. When one of their houses were destroyed, they went out and cleaned it up the next day. They resembled the American middle class. So what Eisenhower said is, you might not know why you're over here, but now you know what you're fighting against.
Yeah, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. It wasn't the Germans.
Well, but we are eventually gonna get into that war. You know, we knew, you know, the American government by 1941 had reports of massive atrocities, and then it took a little bit of a time for Auschwitz to get in terms of information. You got to remember, Auschwitz was liberated January 1945, and you had American bomber crews actually fly over Auschwitz and not specifically know that it was there. And then the excuse was, well, the quickest way to save the Jews was to win the war. Yep. There was some truth to that, but we also had massive aircraft that was throughout Europe, in southern Italy, southern Europe itself, and then even the Soviets as well. So, but these films, these documentaries go a long ways, you know, and I think Spielberg and Tom Hanks, they have a relationship that's beneficial for everybody else.
And let's thank HBO and Apple TV because they're the ones bankrolling these.
Yeah, sure. And they got the ball rolling. You got to remember, HBO made films. One was on Forbidden about a Jewish Berliner who survives.
They made Conspiracy about.
They made Conspiracy. They made the movie on Simon Wiesenthal, when he was liberated from Mauthausen. They've done a lot of history stuff, a lot of sports stuff also. Documentaries on Joe Louis and Ali and Frazier and all kinds of stuff. So they've been ahead of the game for a while, and I think they've laid down some good groundwork, even though it's their competition. Yeah. They've laid down some good groundwork for some of these streaming. So,
Rich, it's always good to have
you. Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
My name is Liam Carballal. This is History Repeats on hmTv. Thank you, and till next time.